Welcome to the session on contemporary socio-political philosophy. Today we have with us Dr. Nursi, former professor and head, Department of Philosophy, University of Kerala. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Sabina. Today we are going to discuss contemporary socio-political philosophy in India, with particular reference to Aurobindo. The socio-political philosophy of contemporary India is marked by certain features due to mainly two reasons. One is the Muslim invasion and the other is the European invasion. These two traditions have affected the traditional Indian philosophy and molded the contemporary Indian socio-political philosophy. It has given a new form and orientation. Now, the contemporary socio-political philosophy in India has got great appreciation for the values of the individual, social life and national life. And in this sense, we can speak of certain fundamental features of contemporary Indian thought.
Okay, ma'am, can you mention some features of this tradition?
Yes, of course. So, contemporary socio-political philosophy in India mainly features many features, of which we can mention mainly briefly 2-3. One is the positive attitude towards the world. See, all the contemporary thinkers in India emphasize a positive and active attitude towards the world. And we all know that the traditional Indian philosophy is emphasizing asceticism and a negative attitude towards the world. For example, classical Indian philosophy is holding on to the theory of Mayavada and consider that the world is not a fit abode for the self. Hence, they emphasized asceticism and renunciation of the worldly life. But contemporary Indian thinkers provide more humanistic approach to the worldly life.
They have a positive attitude towards life.
For them, the world is not an evil, and self-realization does not signify a state of loneliness of the self. Self-realization is not a state of dissociation of the self from the world. For the contemporary thinkers, spiritual evolution is a state of higher life, the greater powers of consciousness and omnipotence. When a person attains self-realization, his life is dedicated to the service of humanity. He tries to transform the world and change its very structure. So, this is the very core of contemporary social and political philosophy in India. Hence, the contemporary Indian thinkers visualize a positive conception of the world. That is one of the major characteristics of contemporary Indian philosophy. Now, if you look at secondly, it has got a synthetic and integral outlook. That is, it can be considered as a synthesis of the Eastern tradition as well as the Western tradition, because it has grown up in an environment of Western civilization and philosophy, culture and religion. They show a much wider outlook in which they are rooted in the past, while there is assimilation of the contemporary thinking of the Western tradition. Ancient thought is often critically analyzed. It is not simply accepted, not blindly accepted, but it is critically analyzed to make it more universally acceptable. Contemporary Indian thought is more realistic and humanistic in this sense. That is why we say that it is synthetic and integral in character. And the third point that we can look at is the dynamism, openness and Catholicity of contemporary socio-political philosophy in India. So, because we say that contemporary Indian thinkers are liberal and dynamic in their approach towards the notion of religion in particular. Okay? They stand for a Catholic religion which is open, dynamic, universal and all embracing. So, this is the kind of definition that they gave to religion in the contemporary India. They admit the essential unity of all religions, at the same time recognize the existence of diversity among religions.
So, this diversity marks the openness.
Yes. Each religion has its value and serves society in a particular way, that is what they think. Further, they admit the essential unity of religions. Further, they support the comparative analysis of religions. So, because they think that each religion has its value, therefore, it can serve the society in its own way. Therefore, we have to encourage what is called the comparative study of religions. A distinction is made between the spirit of religion and the body of religion. So, this is another very important point that we can notice in contemporary Indian thinkers. So, they make a distinction between the body of religion and the spirit of religion. Okay? So, the body, the myths, rites and rituals constitute the body of religion. And the spirit of religion consists in the intuitive experience of God. Therefore, they make a clear distinction between the spirit and body of religion and emphasize the supreme importance of the spirit of religion, because the body of religion may differ. The rituals, the practices, the forms of worship, forms of places of worship, all this may differ
from culture to culture.
Yes, from religion to religion, maybe in India and even in Western traditions, but the spirit of religion is the same in all religions. Again, all contemporary philosophers hold that a truly religious man is also a social reformer. So, he is not simply a religious man, a true religious man is a social reformer and a true karma yogi, that is what they name him. He actively works for the betterment of the society. That is the mark of a true religious man according to contemporary Indian thinkers. The last characteristic is the humanistic tendencies of contemporary social and political philosophy in India. See, all the contemporary social and political philosophers of India show deep appreciation for the problems of human life and the destiny of man. Okay? The vision of human life and the destiny of man remained a matter of profound concern for them, all of them, not only one thinker, but all of the thinkers. They take a significant concern for the worldly life and the worldly well-being of the human being. Therefore, they laid more stress upon the values of life and their realization through social service, conception of brotherhood and righteous action. So, these are the principles that they emphasize because of this humanistic attitude. Also provides importance to the development of man's ethical and social nature and to cultivate secular values along with the spiritual values.
Ethical values along with the spiritual.
Yes. They do not say that the spiritual values are the only important thing. Along with that, we have
ethical
to
values.
Develop ethical, social, personal and family values. So, that is their contribution. The teachings like selfless action, surrender, dedicated service and fight against evil, ignorance and injustice. So, these are the ways that they advocate their, they express their feelings. Profoundly influenced them to take the spiritual energy to work for the well-being of the society. So, these are the characteristic features, main characteristic features that we find in the contemporary
socio-political
philosophy of India. And these ideas that we can typically find in
Aurobindo.
Yes, the philosophy of Sri Aurobindo.
Ma'am, can you give a general introduction on Aurobindo?
Yes. Sri Aurobindo Ghosh, born in Calcutta in 1872, and he was a scholar in the Greek and Latin traditions. Even though he is an Indian, he is a great scholar in the Greek tradition, Greek philosophical tradition and the Latin traditions. Apart from, he was a professor of English at the Baroda College, Calcutta. He studied Western philosophy and he was attracted by the principles like historical and scientific approach, the powerful inclusive evolutionary principle, and the relentless pursuit of the truth of existence. So, these are typically Western philosophical principles which Sri Aurobindo was very much attracted in. He mastered ancient Indian philosophies of Advaita and Yoga, okay? Particularly the coordinating effort of the Gita and the role of Yoga for total human perfection. So, these are the two ancient Indian traditions that attracted Aurobindo much, the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita and the philosophy of Yoga. These enabled him to develop a philosophy of thought and action which is total, integral and life oriented. So, these are the three terms by which we can explain Aurobindo's philosophy. That is, it is a total philosophy, it's an integral philosophy and it is a life oriented philosophy. His philosophy can be designated as a synthesis of material and spiritual existence. Being the greatest mystique of modern India, he is known like that. His magnum opus, the life divine, presents his robust intellectualism and mystic vision. So, this book is the typical presentation of his own ideas.
The life divine.
Yes. Being a great philosopher and poet, he occupies a unique place of honor among the contemporary humanistic thinkers of India. He possessed a burning optimism for the future of human race. So, that is his, the typical mark of his philosophical contribution. In one thing that we have to note is that he was brought up in a very peculiar way. His childhood, his education, his upbringing was in a peculiar way. See, in Aurobindo's upbringing, scrupulous instructions were carried out to ensure that he should receive an entirely European education, okay, and should not be allowed to make acquaintance with any of the Indian or undergo any Indian influence. Was totally segregated from the Indian type of education, Indian influence, Indian way of life. From the age of 7 to 21, he grew up in England in entire ignorance of India, the people of India, her religion and her culture. Okay. But his attention at the age of 11 began to be drawn in India. So, even in that situation, by the age of 11, he began to be attracted towards the Indian and Indian tradition. And his feeling was soon canalized into the idea of liberation of India. So, it was the freedom movement then. Sri Aurobindo was a theist, absolutist and a mystic. His philosophy is comprehensive enough to account for the fundamental problems of man. He attempts to integrate all forms of existence like matter, life, mind and supermind even going beyond the level of mind. Integralism maintains that the ultimate constitution of reality, all differences and distinctions are dissolved into one undivided whole, the absolute. The real is complete harmony, primordial unity and all inclusiveness. As Brahman or Satchidananda, it is an identity of the entire variety of experiences. So, this is what the philosophy of Aurobindo, which we can find in the social and his social and political views also.
That means he is speaking about the absolute, the whole and the undivided.
Yes. So, that is the final, the absolute, the Satchidananda, the Brahman. But everything is moving towards that. It is only in degrees that we move towards the ultimate. That is what his philosophy is, and this idea of his philosophy is reflected in his social and political ideas. And regarding the social and political ideas, the first point that we can explain is his concept of man.
So, what was his concept about man and how the absolute, how he explained this concept with his idea of absolute?
Sri Aurobindo is a theist and absolutist, as we have already mentioned, comes to the level of social and political philosophy and says that the concept of man or the destiny of man is very, very important. Okay? And therefore, he describes man, he has got a description of man. He says, the being of man is composed of three elements. Okay? psychic behind supporting all the inner, mental, vital and physical, and the outer, the quite external nature of mind, life and body, which is their instrument of expression. But above all is the central being, the Jivatma, which uses them all for its manifestation. It is a portion of the divine self. Accordingly, we can, so this is a definition given by Aurobindo, and from this definition we can find out that there are three aspects of man. A human being means he has got three aspects, namely the surface or the outer level, outer soul, the inner soul or the Chaitya Purusha, and the divine soul or the Jivatma. So, these are the, let us say, three layers of a human being. He has got an
human
outer
being's existence.
Yes. He has got an outer soul or the outer surface, the inner one, the Chaitya Purusha, and the divine, and even above the inner man there is the divine soul. The first is similar to our physical nature. He goes on to explain. The first, namely the outer structure of human being is like our physical nature. It is that aspect of our being that constitutes our waking conscious existence and is evident to our senses. So, that which all see in our outer existence. Yes. The second and third corresponds to our spiritual nature with a slight difference. The Chaitya Purusha and the divine being, they are of spiritual nature, but a little difference. See, what is the difference? The second is the spiritual aspect of man in evolution, the aspect which is going to change and get transformed. Okay? Whereas, I mean, this is the Chaitya Purusha or subtle soul, which is beyond birth and death. Its function is to carry man to spiritual heights. It endeavours through births and is ever active in expediting the divine transformation. So, it is only a means for the higher manifestation or highest manifestation. Now, we come to third. The third is the potentiality of the divine or divinity that has to be fully expressed. It is prior to the human evolution, is conceived as a spark of the divine. According to Aurobindo, the psychic being is inside the evolutionary process, whereas Jivatma is beyond evolution. So, that is their difference. The Chaitya Purusha is that which undergoes evolution. Okay? The goal of evolution is called divine, the divine. So, that is the end for which the Chaitya Purusha is moving. So, this is the major classification of a human being. Now, let us go to have a brief discussion. Okay. One by one. The first is a psychic being. Aurobindo says, the psychic being is the concealed witness and control, the hidden guide, the inner light or the voice of the mystic. Okay? It is that which endures and imperishable in us from birth to birth, untouched by death, decay or corruption, is an indestructible spark of the divine. So, as we said, this is the thing that undergoes evolution. It is a soul, just like the divine soul. Only one thing is that it undergoes evolution. Let us say it is a lower grade soul. Okay? It is the representative of the Jivatman, namely divine, which is the universal spirit. It expresses itself in individual life and existence supporting it. It is the Earthman that inhabits our mind, life and body, participates in the daily activities of man and migrates from one life to another. The psychic being is the principle of individuality because it is present in every individual. And it refers to the dynamic self in us because it is undergoing evolution, it is active. It is the dynamic part of Jivatman, the divine self. Jivatman is the transcendent and pure being, while the psychic being is immanent, individualistic and evolving. So, this is how we can make a distinction between the psychic being and the divine Jivatman, divine being. Okay? Actually, Aurobindo conceives a double soul in man. So, man has got a two souls, double soul. The psychic being or the Atman and the central being or the Jivatman. So, traditionally we speak of the Atman, in the Upanishads and all we speak of Atman and Brahman. So, here Aurobindo says that in the human being itself we can speak of two souls, two Atmans, the individual Atman and the divine Atman,
so,
the Jivatman.
The individual Atman is always having transformation.
Yes.
While Jivatman remains the same.
Remains the same because it is a spark of final, I mean the
divine.
Brahman. It is a spark.
Okay.
It is a part of the final, I mean the absolute.
The absolute.
But the psychic Atman, namely Atman, is subjected to evolution.
Okay.
In one sense we can say it is a means to the realization of the divine being. Okay. In other words, we have an outer soul and inner soul. The inner soul is Jivatman and the outer soul is a psychic being. Jivatman is the spirit or Satchidananda, which is self-existent and above the individuality of the individual. It is the eternal being in an individual. This does not mean that we have two souls. He further explains. It does not mean that every man is having two souls. Okay? This simply means that our outermost being is universal and connected with the Satchidananda, and the inner being is that which participates in the activities of life. The Jivatman is the inmost and psychic being, inmost, and psychic being is the inner aspect of the soul. Psychic being and Jivatman relate to the fact that our individual soul in its inmost being is united with the Satchidananda, but we have also the individuality in us. The psychic being is not yet completely manifested in the human beings. At the present state, the individual soul exercises only partial and indirect control over the mind, life and body. When our lower nature becomes sublime, receptive and open due to the psychic pressure, we gradually develop the soul personality in us. When the psychic being exerts pressure on body, life and mind, our lower nature is purified, and gradually there is the full working of the soul in all our thoughts, emotions, will and behavior. To be a psychic personality is to be fully governed by the soul. The psychic person is an exalted seer. The psychic personality removes our ignorance and orients us towards knowledge. When the psychic personality is not fully developed, we lack in power, consciousness, blessedness and love. So, that is the state of an ordinary human being. When the psychic being takes the control of mind, life and body, the entire being in us turns towards the divine. That is how we can develop we can grow ourselves from the lowest level of lacking. We lack in love, we lack in consciousness, we lack in purity, then we grow towards the divine. That means we are growing in consciousness, we are growing in love, we are growing in mind, like that. That is the what is called the evolutionary process. So, what Aurobindo says is that we have to grow from the psychic being to the divine being.
Ma'am, now we can discuss about the divine. So, how can you mark this transformation from the psychic to the divine, and what is the role of this stage?
Okay. Now, it is at this stage that Aurobindo is mentioning the name called Gnostic being or Superman. Okay. Now, he says that the destiny of man is to become a Superman or a divine being. Every man is destined to become that. So, it is a kind of becoming, it is a process of evolution and we have to attain it, and that state is called the state of the divine being, or it is called Superman, or it is Gnostic being. Okay. He says, although psychic transformation is the one necessary condition of the total transformation of our existence, it is not all that is needed for the largest spiritual change. A spiritual transformation from the above is needed for us to possess ourself into universality and transcendence. So, this is the process. And he says, what he says is that we have seen that the psychic self has to evolve, has to move forward. Now, what Aurobindo says is that this is an effort to be taken by a human being. Okay. Now, this effort is not itself enough, because he needs some help. That help is to come from the upper, from the higher level. So, something has to come from the higher level, and here we have to take the effort. From the lower level, we have to take the effort. So, these two things have to meet. That is what he says. A spiritual transformation from the above is needed. So, we have to need some help from the higher level. Okay. The souls that emerge as a result of supramental transformation is the Superman. So, thus as a result of the effort from the lower side as well as from the help from the higher side, something will come out, something emerges, and this emerging being is called a Superman. They are not men of ignorance. This is the characteristic of Superman. They are simply men of knowledge. Ignorance is totally absent in them. Okay. The Gnostic beings, they are called. The Gnostic individual is the consummation of the spiritual man, is a perfect and complete individual. Aurobindo describes the character of the Gnostic being as a complete self-knowledge in all things and at all moments is the gift of the supramental gnosis, with a complete mastery, not merely in the sense of control of nature, but in the sense of a power of perfect self-expression in nature. See, the nature of Superman is that he is not controlling nature or controlling others. It is a kind of self-expressing himself. That is the nature of a Superman. Gnostic individual is the man with an entirely changed and spiritualized outlook. He is an individual who has been able to acquire knowledge. His outlook is towards everything born out of knowledge and nothing out of ignorance. Okay. So, we can say there is no darkness in him, it is all light. In him, the powers of life, mind and body are not suppressed or abolished, but perfected and fulfilled. See, the powers of life, mind and body, that is the nature of a human being. So, in a Superman, these are not suppressed or abolished. These are not unnecessary things, but they are perfected and fulfilled. Means they are refined, modified, cultured, perfected and fulfilled in a Superman or Gnostic being. Gnostic being is just like a Jivan Mukta in the sense it also represents the consummation of this worldly nature. Okay. And attains a stage under the conditions of this very life. So, he is just like a Jivan Mukta. Means even after attaining Mukti, he is continuing his life as in the world as a human being. As a human being. But unlike the Jivan Mukta, the Gnostic being attempts to bring down the higher light and consciousness into the evolutionary process. So, this Gnostic being has got a function to perform, unlike the Jivan Mukta. Means that he has to bring down the higher light to the evolutionary process, so that others can also undergo evolution. Others can also be helped to attain perfection. So, that is his duty. Gnostic being has got a duty.
Same as the duty of Jivan Mukta.
Yes, of course. And again, the Gnostic being is not an entirely new existence, entering into a new life or world, but is perfecting and divinizing of the earthly existence itself. So, we cannot say he is a new man, but it is the perfecting of the worldly life, human life. Hence, it is said that all supermen or Gnostic beings can be thought of as Jivan Mukta, but all Jivan Muktas are not supermen.
Okay.
There is a slight difference, because Superman has got a function to perform, has to bring the higher light down for the to serve the humanity, namely the other people. Of course, this kind of function is not present in Jivan Mukta, and that is how we can make a distinction between a Jivan Mukta and a Gnostic being. And remember, Jivan Mukta is a traditional Indian concept, but Gnostic being is something advocated by Aurobindo. Okay.
Okay.
So, this is the typical nature of a human being according to Aurobindo. He has to perfect himself, has to become a superman, and becoming a superman, he has to serve the others to become superman.
He has to serve the whole humanity.
Yes, the other human beings in the society. So, that is the nature of a man according to Aurobindo.
Okay, ma'am. Can we highlight some main points that we have discussed now?
We have discussed that Sri Aurobindo was a social and political thinker of contemporary India. He was great concern for humanity or human being. Apart from the fact that he is a great poet and mystic, he recognized that the life of the common man is very, very important. Okay? And in that case, he says that the present man is an incomplete man. The present man living in a society is not perfect, and what he needs is perfection. He has to attain perfection. So, that is the main point of the concept of man according to Aurobindo. In that case, he says that the man that is known to us and is evident to our senses is not the real man. That the man that we find in the society, it is not his real nature, and therefore, man has to transform to the supramental level and undergoing a process of evolution. And in that sense, he says that man has the twin aspects of external and internal nature. The inner nature is composed of the psychic being and the divine being, the Chaitya Purusha and the Jivatma. Okay? And the destiny of man is to become the superman or Gnostic being. So, therefore, what Aurobindo says is, we do not or we need not stop here. So, the present life of human being, the present social life is to be transformed. Each and every man has to be transformed to the higher level, the supramental level, that is the level of the Gnostic being, because that is the real nature of man, the original nature of man according to Aurobindo. This is the essence of the concept of man according to Aurobindo, which he discussed in his social philosophy.
Okay. Okay, ma'am. Can we give some questions for the students from this session?
Yes, you can continue.
First one, explain the characteristics of contemporary socio-political thought in India. Second, comment on the life of Sri Aurobindo. Third, summarize the works of Sri Aurobindo. Fourth, discuss Aurobindo's vision of man. Fifth, examine the concept of Superman. Ma'am, can you mention some reference for further study?
So, Aurobindo is a well known contemporary Indian philosopher, and the ashram dedicated to Sri Aurobindo in Pondicherry ashram is a very good resource of the complete works and life and activities of Sri Aurobindo. Any student can go there and have research materials on Sri Aurobindo from there. Apart from that, many printed books are there on the writings and the works of Sri Aurobindo. Now, in a contemporary Indian philosophy, books on contemporary Indian philosophy are available in plenty. For example, contemporary Indian philosophy by G.V. Saroja, then contemporary Indian thought by B.K. Lal, contemporary Indian philosophy by Srivastava. So, these are the books on which all the contemporary Indian thinkers are dealt with in detail. Students can access these books from libraries of philosophy departments in the universities and libraries. Plenty of materials are available for their further research and study, writing assignments and so on.
Thank you for watching this session. We will meet again with another session, Nationalism and Human Unity by Sri Aurobindo. Thank you.
Thank you.